In this video, I'll demonstrate the colored pencil techniques I used to create this tiger. In the first minute of this video, you can see how I create the rough drawing in graphite pencil in preparation for the colored pencil shading. I start with the simple shapes that make up the tiger's face and neck. I use an ellipse to represent the face and eyes, and a cylinder to represent his neck. I am using a HB pencil as it's not too hard and will not leave indentations in my paper, but not too soft and dark that I will not be able to erase it. Once I've established the basic structure of the tiger with simple shapes, I then start drawing in the tiger's irises, pupils, and the markings on the tiger's face. This initial sketch is very important. Take your time with it. Consider the relationships of different shapes, the negative and positive space, to ensure you get the tiger's anatomy spot on. The tiger's eyes, nose, and mouth curve around his spherical head. Make sure the angle of his eyes, nose, and mouth are correct. If unsure, consider the angle with a ruler. Before you start shading or drawing in colored pencil, take a 20-minute break and do something to take your mind off the drawing. Then come back with fresh eyes. Make sure you stand up so you can see your drawing from a distance. If you see any areas that can be improved, fix them immediately. Using Prismacolour Premier colored pencils, I start shading the tiger's cheek. I use the color cream as my base coat. Then I layer using jasmine and yellow ochre for the yellows, and burnt ochre, sienna brown, and light umber for the browns. I shade the tiger's dark markings using burnt umber, dark brown, indigo, and a little black. I shade around the eye, determining the tone and coloration in this area to give context before shading the eye. The eyes are said to be the window to the soul. When it comes to drawing an animal, they are the most important element. Get the eyes right, and the animal will look alive and have personality. Get them wrong, and you might as well throw away your drawing. I shade the iris using soft pressure, and I shade using curved lines to emphasize that the form of the iris is an ellipse. I create the base coat for the iris using cream. The area directly around the almond shape of the eye is shaded using dark brown, and the greys of the markings around the eye is created using cool grey 30%. The pupil is shaded using indigo. I build up the iris using jasmine and yellow ochre. I then use a layer of bronze directly around the pupil. Make sure to leave the tiger's eye highlight the white of the paper. Use white around the edges of the highlight to make sure it is the round shape that softly blends into the yellows around the iris. Leave the bottom of the iris lighter, as this will make the iris look more three-dimensional. Now, just refine the colors and gradation of the eye, and it is complete. Now, continue shading the areas above the eyes and nose using cream, jasmine, yellow ochre, goldenrod, sunburst yellow, and orange chrome. For the dark markings, use burnt umber, indigo, and a little black. Do not be timid with your use of color and tone. For your drawings to jump on the page, you need to use a large tonal range everywhere from white to black. Add indigo or reds to your darkest tones to add depth. Once you've shaded in the base tones of cream in the yellow areas of the tiger's head and are moving on to shading in the fur, make sure to use lines that follow form. Since the tiger's head is a spherical shape, use short lines that arc around the tiger's head. I'm drawing on rising museum board as an archival board is acid and lignin free. I use it to map my drawings, and it's also a great surface to draw on. It's great for realistic work as it's quite smooth. My friend actually works for the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and this is the board the Art Gallery of New South Wales uses to map all its paintings and drawings, so you know it's going to be very archival and very high quality. Moving on to the second eye, I start with the cream for the base coat on the iris, using curved lines that follow form. I draw in the pupil in indigo, then I bring in the pinks at the side of the eye using rosy beige. I build up the eye again using yellow ochre and jasmine. I then draw the browns around the eye using dark umber. Then I add bronze around the pupil to give the eye more character. Leave the highlights of the eyes, the whites of the paper, and as you can see, this makes them jump off the paper. I draw some of the markings at the top of the snout so we can see the eyes on both sides, now totally surrounded by fur. Then I bring in the oranges of the fur at the top of the snout, starting with cream, then layering on top of the cream with goldenrod. I move to the top of the tiger's head, bring in these dark markings using dark umber. Notice how the markings curve around the head, making the drawing look more three-dimensional. I move on to the orange areas, using cream, then layering goldenrod and orange chrome over the top, and white for the lightest areas. I start the ears using cream and sunburst yellow on the edges. I then layer in bronze and dark umber and indigo in the dark areas. For the highlight areas surrounded by the darks, I use cream, goldenrod, and warm grey. I turn to the right side of the head and bring in the markings on this side following form. Using the same colour combination I used on the previous side of the heads for both the dark markings and the orange and light markings. Underneath the right ear I bring in some greys, both cool and warm greys. I bring in the markings arcing around the face, making sure my original drawing is correct. If you are sitting down, make sure to stand up every 5 minutes to ensure you can see your drawing holistically from a distance. Standing at an easel is even better as it forces you to step back all the time and see your picture from a distance. Each time you put down a layer, you fill up more of the pores in your paper and the drawing looks more complete. With rough or coarse paper, you must build up your drawing using a large amount of layers. With smooth paper, your drawing will look good after a few layers. Moving on to the snout, I use a base coat of beige. I then layer over the top using goldenrod, bronze, light umber, and burnt ochre. I then start the cheek area below the nose using burnt umber for the dark markings and using beige, bronze, and whites for lighter areas between each of the long dark mark areas. As always, use some short curved lines to mimic form. It's important to be very careful creating the nose, so both the shape looks right and the coloration looks natural. I use light peach, deco peach, bluish pink, and rose to build up the nose. I use white for the highlights, where the light hits the top of the nose. For the darks around the nose, I used dark umber, indigo, and black to make sure the contrast was punchy and the nose stood out. To bring an animal like a tiger to life, we need to study the subtle variations in its fur. To replicate this subtlety, we need to build up many layers of different colours to have any hope of capturing its majesty. Every part of the tiger's fur should contain probably a minimum of like 5 different colours. Moving on to the tiger's right ear, I start with a base coat of beige on the left side, and strokes of bronze, white, and a variety of greys on the right side. I then move back to the left side of the ear and layer over the top of the base coat with goldenrod and sunburst yellow. To create the fur hanging from the bottom of the mouth, I first bring in the darks using burnt umber and black. I then layer fur around these areas using bronze, beige, and a range of cool and warm grey pencils. To create the whiskers, I had already indented the paper with special indentation tools. You can see as I draw around them, the whiskers stand out as they stay the white of the paper. This is because very little coloured pencil rubs into the indented curved lines of the whiskers. I build up the oranges of the fur just below the mane using beige, goldenrod, sunburst yellow, and orange chrome. I add the dark markings using burnt umber and black. I then go back into the oranges using sienna brown and burnt ochre to give the fur its luster. Make sure to be very careful when drawing around the mane to make sure you leave many strands of fur hanging down to add a realistic feel to your work. I then draw around the whiskers on the other side of the tiger's face to make sure they stand out. I keep building the fur on the tiger's neck and upper body using beige, yellow ochre, goldenrod, sunburst yellow, and orange chrome to add depth to the piece. Underneath the tiger's chin, using short and long curved lines, I use bronze, cool grey 20, 30 and 50%, warm grey 20, 30 and 50%, beige, ginger root and cream to create a three-dimensional finish. I then add a few finishing touches and presto, the drawing is finished. If you enjoyed this tutorial, subscribe to my YouTube channel.